I'm audible properly. You guys can hear me.
Yes, we can. Hello.
Hi, good morning. So, great. So we can begin today's session. Right. So back and neck straight. And remove your glasses. And then just gently close the eyes. You can sit in any comfortable posture. And just start observing your breath. Keep the body aligned. And the neck and shoulders relaxed. Once you attain that stillness in the body, begin to deepen your breath. We'll be chanting Om together, followed by the Shanti mantra. Inhale deeply for Om. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah. Sarve santu sarve Pasya Shanti. Just feel the vibrations. Join the palms together in front of the chest and rub the palms together. Keep them on the eyes. very slowly while blinking and looking at the palms. Start coming back to the public smile. And namaste. Let's begin today's class. So, yesterday we were talking about the origination of yoga. Yeah, and we discussed, how our own, the human psychology, how the mind works, and what was the reason that yoga originated, because of how we think, like curiosity, or when we were able to perceive this thing that suffering was the only truth. That is when we the mind also had this perception that if there is some suffering, there must be a solution to the suffering as well, right? So because of our human tendencies, we give one portion of the origination of yoga this reason that our own mind, we understood our own mind, and we were able to philosophers, the yogis, they were able to tap into that deeper, or I would say higher intellectual ability or higher mind, which could also perceive that there is a solution, right? If I am in a state of a lower mind, then I will never think that there is a solution. I will get stuck with this realization that there is something. And some people do, when they realize that suffering is the only reality, they get stuck over there and they feel hopeless, right? So they are somewhere just functioning in the lower level of the mind, which can only basically perceive what is and thinks that is the end of the entire reality. But someone who is even momentarily able to tap into a higher level of the mind will be able to see the whole point of spiritual practices or spirituality in general, which encourages you to push beyond what your reality is, to go towards what the basic truth is, right? So one thing is the circumstances, the situations in my life, they can bind me, right? That this is it. But sometimes, we have these moments, right, where we are struggling, but we are just like, no, I'm going to work past this, right? There is an end to this. So that is when, your higher mind kicks in, and, sometimes, you remember, like in yoga philosophy and meditation classes, we will discuss a lot that everything is, impermanent. It's going to change all the time. So, one or two times when you are struggling, this does happen with us as well, that we are just like, no, this is also going to pass, this is temporary, right? So when the higher faculty of the mind came, like people got in touch with that is when origination of yoga took place, because it was seen that there is a process that can help you with this, right? So second reason I wrote yesterday was for mythological reason. Mythological reason why yoga originated, right? So if you go to mythology, things are very simple, right? In reasoning, we use the mind too much, and we try to comprehend and take out a reason for everything. But when you go to mythology, everything is just like purely on what you believe, right? What you believe in. And it's full of stories. If you read any mythological text, if you love stories, you will be fascinated by how beautifully things are put, right? So when it comes to mythology, when we look at that perspective, then we see that Lord Shiva, right? Shiv, SHIV, right? Or Shiva, SHIV. Lord Shiva, he is considered to be the point of origination of yoga, right? He was the person, who practiced yoga and, uh, you know, uh, then passed on the knowledge of yoga into this world, right? And he is considered to be the person who basically, gave all the practices of yoga, right? So he practiced them himself as well, and then he, passed down this knowledge so that all human beings could, benefit from it, right? So another very famous name for him is Adi Yogi. Adiyogi, the first yogi, right? And of course, sometimes it becomes very restrictive. When we use the name of Shiva, some people find it quite restrictive to, practice yoga, right? Because, as certain things are passed down by us from generation to generation, some things which are spiritual or open to everyone, they get categorized into religion. And when religion comes in, there is a clash of beliefs, right? So when people hear the name Shiva, they feel that it is closely connected to Hinduism, and so we shouldn't practice yoga because it's, you know, uh, something that the Hindus are propagating, right? But it is not the case, right? Yoga, as I told you before, also is a very spiritual form of practice, and it should not be restricted to a religion. So next time, when somebody questions you on this, you can totally ask them to practice it themselves and see the change that comes within themselves. So I'm not giving the mythological reason to restrict you, but to tell you that, it's not, Shiva wasn't like, somebody who gave these practices as a form of restriction. Like I said, yoga has this, it's a tool which liberates you, right? So it will have no quality of binding. But yes, if you go to, even Hatha Yoga texts, there, Shiva has been like opening of Hatha Yoga, it greets Lord Shiva for giving these practices so that humankind could benefit from it, right? So when we go to mythology, there are of course a lot of stories, right? So one of the stories of how, yoga came into this, like how it came to us, was that, Lord Shiva, his wife Parvati ji, right? So Lord Shiva, when he perfected all the forms of yoga, his first student, and his wife Parvati ji, he wanted to give that knowledge to her, right? So he, uh, in the when during the day, when uh, Parvati ji became his student, then she was the student, she was not the wife, right? And when they went back home, or when they went back to their house, then Parvati ji became the wife, right? So it was like one fine day, Lord Shiva, he decided he will transmit this knowledge to Parvati ji, right? The knowledge of yoga. And as soon as, he decided that, they, had a full, you know, I would say a full on session on yoga, right? So as soon as they, began, so Shivji again, he became the guru. He took the position of the guru from a husband, and Parvati ji took the position of a student from a wife, right? So now when the guru is teaching, guru and student bond is very, very, special, right? And it is very, close as well. So it's a very special bond that the guru and the student share, right? And when the guru, transmits the knowledge, the student does not interrupt. So, and the student also, in earlier times, they had to prove their capability of taking this knowledge, right? So not like today where we pay the fee and we get the access to the knowledge. No, earlier it wasn't like that, right? So when the guru started, speaking, the student did not interrupt, right? In between, the guru is speaking, they let the guru speak and transmit all the knowledge. And the role of the student is mostly to absorb what is being given by the guru, right? So Shivji, he started giving this knowledge, and he went into a very, flow state. Like, he was totally in that flow state when he was giving this knowledge. So it was pretty long. So, Parvati ji, she got tired, right? And, in between she fell asleep, right? So when he was giving that knowledge, when Shivji was talking, he was in such a trance-like state that he didn't, exactly observe Parvati ji at that point of time, how she was. But while sitting only, she slept a little bit. Like sometimes we also do in our classes, right? We just, get a little bit of nap in between, right? So something like that happened. And, this knowledge, when Shivji was giving this knowledge, they were on the bank of a river. So the river was flowing, and there Shivji and Parvati ji, they were sitting, and this transmission of knowledge was taking place, right? And Yogi's voice is very appealing, right? Very calm, soothing, and very appealing sound the yogi has. And even the words that the yogi speaks, creates a very beautiful vibration in the area in which he speaks. So this vibration, it is caught by all the animals, all the beings around, right? That is how, earlier people got to know that a yogi was coming because of the vibe and the, overall the vibration of the yogi. It was so strong that around all the environment, perceived that a yogi or a spiritual person is going to reach somewhere or is headed towards this place, right? So, there was a fish in the flowing river, and when she, got a little bit glimpse of what is going on, she immediately rushed towards where the sound was coming from. So towards the source of the sound, she rushed over there, right? And when she reached there, like what was going on. But eventually, this was observed that Parvati ji had fallen asleep, right? Even she observed this thing. And how when the guru is speaking, sometimes like we also talk, when somebody is talking to you and you are listening, you momentarily have some body gestures, or you create this sound, when you are listening to someone, so you just like just as a confirmation that you are listening, right? So same thing Parvati ji was doing as Shivji was giving the knowledge, that she was creating this sound confirming that she is listening, right? And after a while, when she fell asleep, so what the fish started doing was she started creating this sound, right? So Shivji never realized that Parvati ji had fallen asleep, because this constant reassurance that she was listening was there, right? But now the fish was doing it. So somehow, very lucky, when Shivji was about to end, Parvati ji woke up, right? So she got saved, right? So she woke up, and when Shivji finished giving all of this knowledge, Shivji asked that, did you understand this, whatever I told you? Any doubts? Like I asked you guys, any doubts, right? So Parvati ji, at that point of time, she confessed that she had fallen asleep during the lecture. She did not taken all the information that he was giving, right? So at that point of time, Shivji got very curious and he said that, I could constantly hear somebody, reassuring me that I am being heard. So where did this sound come from, right? So at that point of time, Shivji noticed that there was a fish, right, in the river, and the fish had taken all the knowledge from the beginning till the end, right? So Shivji, when he saw this thing, he, you know, gave a blessing and a curse both to the fish, right? Now, why the punishment or the curse, right? Because, when the guru is giving the knowledge, permission has to be taken to take that knowledge, and the fish did not take that permission, right? So when it comes to the bonding of the, as I told you, the guru and the student, this permission, this common understanding is developed for the guru transmission. But in this case, it so happened that this did not take place, right? So the fish was also punished, right? So Shivji said that your blessing is going to be that next birth that you're going to take it in human form, right? And you are going to become the transmitter of this knowledge, right? So that was quite amazing. And the punishment that he said will be given to the fish was that when, as a human being, the fish reincarnates, when she will need that knowledge the most, she's going to forget that, right? So, a very famous yogi was born by the name of Yogi 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿, right? 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 became the guru of Gorakhnath, another very famous practitioner of yoga. And, when 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 in his life needed that knowledge the most, he forgot that knowledge, right? The knowledge of yoga. And at that point of time, his own student, Gorakhnath, came in and retaught that information to 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿. But both the things happened. One thing, the fish did take a human incarnation, and second, when it was needed the most, the knowledge was forgotten. So this is somewhere, the mythological trace back of the origination of yoga, right? Even Shivji has been said to, first give the knowledge to 7 of his disciples. They are very famously known as the Saptarishis. And these Saptarishis, they traveled throughout the world, and they, spread this knowledge. They traveled to different parts, and they spread the knowledge of yoga, so that humankind could benefit from it, right? So this actually forms the mythological origination of yoga, right? So today our main topic of discussion was actually the history and development of yoga, right? So you guys can just write this down. Right, so now we are done with the, okay, great. I don't think there would have been any doubts because it was just a story. Yeah. So, now that we have understood the meaning of yoga and the origination, right? So now let's just see how it developed with the years, because it did change. Earlier, people were living a completely different lifestyle, and today we are having a completely different lifestyle. So, the way in which the knowledge is transmitted, yes, it was earlier for us, done from generation to generation. But of course, we take the parts that are relevant most for us, right? And, some parts which were relevant for the people or our ancestors, they are not that relevant for us today, right? We are still working on some other things, developing ourselves in some other things, and then we reach to that level, right? And you know how the environment and everything around us has changed with time, right? So same things now, they have different practical aspects for us, right? So it's very important to understand how it got transmitted to reach to this point where we can see why today, you know, it is being transmitted mostly in the form of asana and pranayama, right? Even meditation is considered to be separate from yoga. You will see most of the people, you know, when they talk of yoga, they say yoga and meditation. But meditation is actually a part of the yogic processes, right? So, you know, this is how the definition slowly changed. And today, mostly asanas are very prominently practiced. So, in order to see why this change happened, why this flow, you know, why this happened, we need to go to a little bit history and development of yoga, right? So, you know, on the basis of a very famous text, the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the timing is actually classified on this basis. Very broadly speaking, it is classified on this basis. So, you know, Patanjali ji, when he came, he systematized the entire process of yoga, right? So I'll elaborate more on this thing, but there is a time period when he wrote this text, when it is believed that he wrote this text. So that time period, one is before that time period, one is after that time period, right? Before yoga was systematized by him and after yoga was systematized. So when we look at the time before, so it is called the pre-classical. Actually, before 500. You know, the time period before 500 BC is considered to be the pre-classical period of yoga. Then the time when Maharishi Patanjali ji wrote this text, it's considered to be the classical. So 500 BC to 800 AD, this is roughly the timeline. Like when you go and research on this also, there are different time periods that are attributed to the existence of Maharishi Patanjali, but it lies between this timeline only, the 500 BC to 800 AD. This is considered to be the classical period. And then we have the post-classical period, which is after this 800 AD. So depending, like if we take the text as the central basis, so that is the classical period. Everything before that is pre-classical, and beyond that is post-classical period, right? The first distinction that we have is this one. So now from 1700s till 1900s, you know, it is considered to be the modern time, modern era for yoga. Right? And after 1900, it is the contemporary era. So the post-classical period, when we come very close to our own time, our own timeline of existence, then it is divided from 1700 till 1900, it's the modern era. And after the 1900, it is the contemporary era. right? So we'll talk about yoga in each and every of these like timelines. So if you come to the pre-classical period, the time before the process of yoga was systematized, then we will see that, when you come to Indian tradition, Vedas, Vedas, and Upanishads. Sorry, Upanishads. Vedas and Upanishads, these are, if we go really back in history, these form our sources, right, for all the spiritual knowledge that we had over here. The Vedas are considered to be the oldest written texts when it comes to the spiritual practices, when it comes to the Indian tradition, right? And Vedas actually form the background. Like when I was talking about, when I gave the introduction of philosophy also, I divided the schools on the basis of their belief and whatever the Vedas have said, like they are agreeing with that or they are neutral towards it, neither agreeing, not disagreeing, right? So Vedas, formed this basis and they date back thousands of years, even though, in the written form, they were when they were written. So that time period it dates back to thousands of years, right? And knowledge was being transmitted from one generation to the other through word of mouth mostly, and that thing, the texts were also there, but from generation to generation, earlier before they were in that writing form, Vedas, the knowledge of the Vedas was passed through word of mouth, and then there came a time period when it got written, right? And then it was transmitted in that form as well, right? So this entire knowledge of, even though you will not directly find the word yoga in the Vedas, you will see that the various limbs or the process that I was talking about, you will find the mention of asanas, pranayama, meditation in a very scattered manner in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, all of these things are talked of, but they are very, very scattered and, it is not in a system. So somewhere when you will read, you will find the mention of a practice asana, right? Or you will find the mention of something which is related to your respiration and changing the breath. So the pranayama, but no direct or in a flow that information wasn't available, right? So before the process of yoga was systematized, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Purans, Smritis, all of these texts, and even like we have very two famous. Yeah, any doubt? Okay. So even the very famous texts of, we have two very famous epics over here, which are Mahabharata and Ramayana, right? So just you don't have to write this down. I'm just telling you for information, right? So Mahabharata and Ramayana, these very famous epics, they existed at that point of time. And even, Buddhism was very famous. So if you look from today's timing, Buddha's time was around 2,500 years ago. So that actually forms this time, 500, before 500 BC. So that is considered to be the time of Buddha. So teachings of Buddha were very prominent at that point of time. And even, the darshans. So Sankhya Darshan was present, Siddhartha Gautama, he studied everything in his time that existed, right? So he studied this philosophy also, the Sankhya philosophy, and the practices that he came up with, they were more prominent. Jainism was very prominent at this point of time, before 500 BC. And that is how knowledge was transmitted through word of mouth, through reading the already existing texts. That is how yoga was. And yoga, if you see at that point of time, it was a way of living more than like the asana practice or all of these things. It was actually a part of the way in which a person conducted their life, right? So at that point of time, written thing wasn't. Today we look for a lot of books and intellectual information on these things, but earlier it was more of like I said, word of mouth. It was being passed down, so it was a part of the tradition and the culture, right, of the people, that this is something you have to learn. So in modern times, yoga, some people learn, some people don't do, right? But some spiritual practices go on in our houses as well. Like in my house, I remember uh, you know uh, we used to have a lot of chanting being done in the house. Like my mom, she used to wake up and do puja and prayer basically, and in the evening she used to make us sit with her, and we also learned a lot of mantras, because this thing was going on in our house, right? So uh, this was in modern times, this is just a little bit part of the day, but earlier these things were like a part of life itself, right? So then we come down to your classical period, the time when the entire knowledge of yoga was systematized, right? um, let me see. Okay, we have that. Okay, so then we come to the classical period, but before that, are there any doubts so far? Okay. No doubts? All right. Okay. So then we come down to the classical period. At that point of time, it was felt, a need was felt to systematize the entire process of yoga, so that people could work on it more efficiently, right? And in order to make it more accessible, like Vedas, everybody could not study. Even the form in which Patanjali ji, gave the information of yoga, it is also a highly coded form. But I would say it is much better than the knowledge of the Vedas, because Vedas and Upanishads, there are so many in number. The Vedas are so vast, so it would take years and years for people to even go through the entire content. But if you come to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, you will see that there are only 195 sutras, right? So 195 verses he gave. And within that, the entire knowledge of yoga he summarized, right? So everything from the Vedas and the Upanishads, all the essence of the practices he took out and he systematized it, so that it would be easier and more accessible, right? Easier for people to practice it and more accessible to the people of that time, right? So, you know, he, combined, like I said, in the Vedas, body awareness has been talked of, the concept of asana pranayama has been talked of. So what he did was he compiled it. He said, okay, advanced level student, if advanced level student is coming, then we are going to do this, this, this. If intermediate level of student is coming, they can do this, 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 right? And then beginner level student is coming, then that person can do this, 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 right? So he systematized everything, and he gave the meaning of yoga, and very, in this very brief text, he even gave the final goal, Kaivalya, that one has to achieve, right? When they go through the process of yoga, they have to achieve the final goal. So in this text itself, he consolidated everything, starting from the meaning of yoga to the process to what is going to come on the way to the end point, right? So you can find everything in the Patanjali, very clearly stated, right? And he did not, uh, very concise way of presenting the information. Basically, he did not deviate from anything. He just simply gave the information out in a very concise manner, right? So his system of yoga is the Raj Yoga system, right? So we will do the schools of yoga, right, in our upcoming classes. So one of them is Raj Yoga, right, which is directly, when the name of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are mentioned, Raj Yoga is in itself mentioned. So Raj Yoga is a very advanced practice. So, when we go back to that time, 500 BC till 800 AD, so, environment was much cleaner, much more clean. The food that was consumed was also different. The quality of the air was totally different, right? So, at that point of time, a person, if they wanted to practice Raj Yoga, the environment was much more conducive to start those practices, right? So, at that point of time, Raj Yoga was prominent. Today we see Hatha Yoga is more prominent. When you do Ashtanga Vinyas, when you do Vinyasa flow. So these are like all, if you have Hatha Vinyasa classes. So Hatha, which is more concerned with the purification and the preparation of the body for Raj Yoga. So earlier one could, because of the environment, because of everything around them, one could directly step into the practice of Raj Yoga. But today we are ill, right? So first we need to get into a healthy state, and then you need to develop the health as well, so that the work of the mind can be started, right? So today we see more like Hatha Yoga, and even in Hatha Yoga we only see a few parts of Hatha Yoga, like I said, Shatkarma, Asana, Pranayama. These are parts of Hatha Yoga. There are many more practices when you see the texts of Hatha Yoga as well. So, we were at that point of time, Raj Yoga was very prominent. Then as we came down to the post-classical period, that is when, Tantra Yoga and Hatha Yoga, the Nath cult, which is very famously associated with Hatha Yoga, that came into existence, and even Adi Shankaracharya. So these modern gurus, when not modern gurus, but these were the people, who came and, compiled a lot of information. So when you see Adi Shankaracharya, Bhagavad Gita, he is considered to be the compiler. So from his time, Bhagavad Gita got a lot of light and got very famous, right? So he compiled everything that was scattered over there. He compiled, and Adi Shankaracharya's, way of approaching yoga. A lot of people thought that this fits us more, like the way in which he presented the information, right? And as we come down, Tantra yoga practices. So Tantra yoga, which considers the body as an instrument, right? So a lot of practices of Tantric yoga, they started getting famous, and then the practices of Hatha yoga, they started getting very famous, because eventually it was seen the work of the mind cannot be done. The mind is getting very unstable, right? So if you see Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, you will see first there are some rules and regulations that have been given by him. So if you cannot follow those, then you cannot move to other levels, right? So as we came down to the modern times, those rules and regulations were first removed, because people were generating a lot of guilt in the mind. They weren't able to follow those things, right? And there was so much guilt that was generated in the mind. So what happened was they removed those parts. They said that now these have become very advanced parts, right? So we will introduce them later when the mind and the body is stable enough to pursue these rules and regulations. Before that, they were acting as an obstacle. So, when you see Hatha Yoga, it starts with the practice of asana, right? It doesn't, or Shatkar. It doesn't start with the practice of yamas or niyamas, the rules that I'm talking of. It doesn't start with those. Those rules are incorporated later on, right? So they said that first, prepare the body, right? Body was also not prepared in the modern, like we come to the post-classical era, so even body wasn't prepared. So, first they said, okay, let's prepare the body, right? So asana, pranayama, shatkarma, bandhas, mudras, all of these things, Hatha yogic practices basically gained a lot of push at this point of time. So preparation of the body and the mind so that one could be ready for Raj. So the main purpose of practicing Hatha yoga is not to gain more flexibility or to do headstand, handstand. The main purpose of practicing Hatha yoga is to prepare the body for the work of the mind. Right? Raj yoga is directly it focuses and emphasizes on the working of the mind, right? And practices like meditation are very prominent over there. But for Hatha yogis, it was said that first make the body ready so that you don't face that difficulty if the body is not stable, if the breathing is not controlled, then meditation will become very difficult, right? You will not be able to, most of us, we are told that we are meditating, but most of the times we are just concentrating, right? So meditation is not that easy to achieve. You would have seen this thing in your meditation classes also. The moment you are asked to close the eyes and observe breathing, your mind, immediately runs away, right? So we are not in a state where we can meditate. We are still working on developing our concentration and sharpening the mind, right? So for Hatha yoga, to make this process easier, all the practices of Hatha yoga were given. So as we move down to the post-classical period, these practices started gaining more, attention, or it was seen that it was easier to incorporate in the life, right? Then as we come down to the modern era, so you will see, gurus like Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo. These people, became further propagators of the yoga process, Patabai Joyce, the Ashtang Vinyas flow that you do in your classes, that is given by Patabai Joyce. So 𝐃𝐚𝐲-𝟔, Vinyasa flow was given by him. So these people, they existed in the modern era where they saw that even the pure Hatha yogic practices cannot be practiced by people these days. So when you open the Hatha yogic text, you will not see all of these stretching or pre-practices that you do. Directly asanas are given. So now the body is not even capable of performing those asanas. So other things were added, stretching practices were added, different way of approaching the entire process of asana was added. So many variations in pranayama came. How you have to work with the breathing, right? So all of these things, as time progressed, now the environment became such that even those things could not be directly achieved, right? So a lot of variations at this point of time, came in. So 𝐵K he has own approach when it comes to yoga. When you see Aurobindo, so he has his own practice of integral yoga, right, where he has systematized the entire process and said that this is how you have to go about it. So he understood that people in today's time, they cannot, right? They cannot. So they need a bridge. Now we need a bridge, right? So they created their own practices so that people could advance in their spiritual journey, right? Like, I'm going to end in just 2-3 more minutes, right? So, and then, when we come to the contemporary time, so things are, again, they have gotten worse, right? So there's so much pollution in the environment, when industrialization happened, so much pollution, quality of the food has gone down, right? There are so many, preservatives that are added to our day-to-day food. So, that is how the body also reacts. So now, when you start the asana classes, you're just like, this has happened to my body. I cannot even bend down and touch the ground, right, with a straight back, right? So this is because of our environment, the pollution, the food that we consume, the quality of the food we consume. Mind also has those kinds of thoughts. So many people are battling depression and anxiety these days. So now when we see yoga, even though Sadhguru, so contemporary yogis constitute of people like Sadhguru, Sri Ravi Shankar, Osho, 𝐿 So all of these people, they made an attempt to, modernize the practices even more so that it can become suitable for the people of the current time. So you will see when you go to art of living, it's very practical how you can, add it into your day-to-day life. And if you go to practices like Vipassana, then you will see that, little bit hard to get into your life, but very beneficial, right? So they cleanse the environment at that point of time. They make you cut off from everything around you, especially if you see Vipassana. You're not allowed phones, you're not allowed, books and everything. So they cleanse the, environment also in such a way so that the mind can become ready for processes like meditation, right? So these people, they, are currently passing down the entire knowledge of yoga depending on how we are, right? They are modernizing the practices, so there are a lot of variations that you will see. And mostly yoga is in today's world used as a therapeutic practice. So now we have come down to this, where yoga, we are ill. So yoga therapy, you would have heard of, you have your Ayurveda and therapy classes. So now it has the relevance of yoga is in the field of therapy, where we are incorporating these practices in order to cure ourselves. So now humankind has come down to this point of time, and the health, now not only normal health, we are ill. So we are using yoga, the science and art of yoga to regain our health, and hence it is seen more as a therapeutic practice than a spiritual practice, right? So it started as a very spiritual endeavor, but depending on the time, now you can see how it changed and how people, whatever is most relevant for them, they are using the spiritual form of yoga in that aspect, right? So any doubts in history and development and origin, because from tomorrow we will start your other topics, right? And they are going to be circled more around all the texts that you have in your syllabus, and very interesting things we have come up. So any doubts?
I have a question. This Patanjali Sutras, this was in the times of classical period or post-classical?
Classical. So Patanjali is considered to be the father of classical yoga.
Okay, thank you. And it all happened in India?
See, earlier, the geography of India was also very different. So you can, yes, say broadly speaking, this area that we have around us, so Siddhartha Gautam was, like if in this time we see he was, I think it's around India, basically. So earlier the geography of India was much different. So, Buddha also mostly he covered and existed in India, and even Patanjali, even though his exact location is not known, but parts around India, which were earlier parts of India. So he existed somewhere around there. So not exact location is known, but yeah, around him. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other doubts that I can address? Okay. So let's end today's session. So back and neck straight, just gently close your eyes. We'll just quickly chant Om one time, followed by 3 chants. Inhale deeply for Om. Shanti. join the palms together and just bow down. Let's begin our day with a sense of gratitude. Put the palms together. Keep them on the eyes. Very slowly while blinking and looking at the palms. Start coming back, looking at the eyes. And namaste to everyone. I will see all of you for your pranayam class in the afternoon. Om Shanti and bye-bye.
Om Shanti. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.